Hi, I'm Mike from 1A Auto. We've been selling auto parts for over 30 years.
What's up, guys? Here we have a 2006 E46 BMW 325Ci. We're going to show you how to do front brakes on it. As you can see on this right front wheel, we have a lot of brake dust. That's an indication that your front brakes are probably worn to the extent that you need to replace them. So we're going to go ahead and replace them. These are the Nakamoto brakes that we got from 1AAuto.com that we're going to be installing on this BMW. Some of the features of these brakes is the slotted and drilled rotors. They're lighter, they're going to be better performance, better cooling. They're zinc coated, which is going to prevent them from rusting. The pads, there's a sensor that goes in the pad, so you're going to want to get a sensor. Get yours at 1AAuto.com. You'll be ready to rock and roll. All right, we're going to loosen up the lug nuts before we raise the vehicle up. We're going to use a 17mm socket and a breaker bar. Just crack them free. And then we're going to raise the vehicle. Take the lug studs out. As you can see, it's more of a stud versus a lug nut. Before I take the last one out, because of the lug studs, I'm going to push the wheel on. That'll hold the wheel up so it won't fall when I take this last lug stud out. Then grab the wheel, you can pull it off. We're going to take the caliper off. We need to access the caliper slide bolts. There's these little covers that go over the bolts. So just take a little screwdriver and pry this back. Take this little cap off. Take them both off. And that'll access the bolts. Right, now we're going to use a 7mm Allen socket and a ratchet. We'll loosen these up. We'll take them out. There's the top one. Now we're going to remove this anti-rattle spring. I'm going to take 2 screwdrivers. I'm going to just pry this up. This is on the outside of the caliper. And then push. And that will release that side. And then do the same for the bottom. It's a good idea to wear safety glasses while you're doing this, in case it goes flying. Now we're going to remove the caliper. We're going to take a screwdriver, just slide it in here, and I'm just going to pry on the caliper a little bit. That's just going to compress the piston a little bit, and then it'll make it easier to pull it off. And we can slide the caliper off. I'm going to support this caliper with a bungee cord. Go around the spring, slide it in there. Slide it in there. Right. For the outer pad, we'll just grab a screwdriver and just slide it off, just like that. Now we're going to take the caliper bracket off. We're going to take these caliper bracket bolts out. I'm going to use a 16mm socket and a breaker bar. Once I break them free, then I'm going to switch to a ratchet. and these bolts are pretty loose. Once you break them free, take them out by hand. Make sure you support the bracket when you're taking the last one out, and then pull the bracket towards the back of the vehicle. All right, there's a bolt here that holds this rotor on. We're going to use a 6mm Allen to get it off, and try taking it off with a ratchet. And it's really hard on there, so we're going to use a impact driver. All right, before I take this bolt out, I'm just going to clean it out a little bit with a straight pick. There's a little bit of dirt in there. And then I'm going to spray this with some rust penetrant. Let it soak for a little bit. All right, so this is the impact driver I'm going to be using. We sell these at 1aauto.com. This has just a Phillips bit on it. So I'll take that Phillips bit off, and I'm going to use my socket, my 6mm Allen. All right, so this driver can go two ways. So if you flip it to the right, it's going to tighten it. We're going to flip it to the left. It's going to loosen it. And I'm going to hold a little bit of pressure towards the left side. And then I'm going to hit it with a hammer. When I do that, it's doing two things. It's putting pressure on the bolt, and it's twisting it to the left. And there it goes. It came free. Pull that off. So when taking that off, one thing you want to keep in mind, you might want to take a lug nut so that the rotor doesn't fall. Luckily ours was rusted on there, so it didn't fall. But now I'm going to take a hammer and I'm going to tap around the edges, and that'll break the rotor free from the hub. Now we'll take the lug stud off, pull it off. These are our old pads and rotors. These are our new pads and rotors from 1aauto.com. As you can see, the height of the rotors are the same circumference of the rotor. The pads, compare the pads, the clips on the back are the same. The ears on the pads are the same. Obviously these are a lot thinner. If we check with a gauge, you can see these are about 4mm. So not quite in the red yet, but they're getting pretty close. The new rotors have these slots, and they're drilled, so they're going to be lighter. It's going to stay cooler. You're going to get more performance out of these brakes. Get yours at 1aauto.com and you'll be ready to rock and roll. All right, now we're going to clean up this caliper bracket. We'll take a wire brush, get in here, get some of this rust and dirt off of here, and brake pad material. This will help the pads slide a lot better when it's got the new pads on. Once we get that, most of that cleaned up, you can use a little bit of brake parts cleaner. Spray it down, wipe it off with a rag. We'll do the same for the other side. For the caliper slides, we'll take the wire brush, we'll clean these, just like that. These are a little bit different than most brake systems. And then when we install these, we'll take a little bit of brake caliper grease and lubricate these. We'll do the same with the other one. So you're going to want to check our website when you go to install these. This happens to be the passenger side. These slots go as if they're cutting into the wind when you're driving, but it explains that on our website, which side goes where. Before we install these, there is a coating on these. We're going to use some brake parts cleaner and then wipe it with a rag. Now we'll take that coating off. So that we're going to clean up this hub surface a little bit. This one really isn't too bad. Normally there's a lot of rust on here and we have to work real hard to get it off. But we'll just use a wire brush, clean this up a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to install this rotor. Slide it on. You're going to want to line that hole up with the threads right there. And we'll take our 6mm Allen bolt, get that started. I'm just going to snug it up. I don't want this too tight, so just give it a little, just a little snug. And that'll be good. And we're going to install this caliper bracket. Just slide it over the rotor like that. Take our 16mm bolts and get those started. Just like that. I'm going to snug them down and then I'm going to torque them. Now I'll use this torque wrench. We actually sell this torque wrench at 1aauto.com. And I'm going to use a 16mm socket. We're going to torque these to 81 foot-pounds. Now we're going to compress the caliper. So we'll remove our bungee so that we can work on the caliper. I'm going to flip it to the side. I'm going to take one of the old brake pads. I'll take the one without the clip on it, just so I can hold it there. And then I'm going to use this brake caliper compressor tool, loosen it up a little bit. We actually sell these at 1aauto.com. I'll loosen it a little more. Get that in place. I'm going to screw this down here. And when I'm tightening this, this is pushing fluid from the piston through the hoses, through the lines, back up to the master cylinder and into the reservoir. And when I'm doing this, I do not need to bleed the brakes after because we're not cracking the line free or anything. So the system stays closed, so we're not going to have to bleed it. Now our caliper piston is compressed. Now we can install the pads. Now that that's compressed, I'm just going to re-secure the bungee to hold this so my caliper doesn't fall. Just put that out of the way for right this second. And I'll take the outer pad. I'm going to put a little bit of brake grease on the outside ears. This will help the pads slide on the slides. I'll put a little brake grease on the back side here. This will help it be a little bit quieter. And then we'll slide this right here on the caliper bracket. Just like that. Slide that, line that up, slide it on. I'm going to put a little caliper grease on the inboard pads, and then right here. Like that. Now I'll take the caliper, take the bungee off. And then this one slides into the piston. And just line it up and push it down. Try not to get any of the grease on the pads. Pull the bungee cord away. If you've got a little grease on the pads, you can take a little brake parts cleaner and wipe it off. That's good. Now we're going to slide the caliper in place. Line that up. push it down. We have our 2 caliper slide pins. We just put some grease on those. We'll slide those in here. And the top one in. Line those up. And we'll take our 7mm Allen socket and get those started. Get the top one started by hand as well. Sometimes you're going to move the caliper around a little bit, trying to get it to line up with the threads. This is why you want to do it by hand. You don't want to strip the threads out while you're doing it. Once that you see that it is biting a little bit, then you can use a ratchet. We'll snug it up. Then we're going to torque these caliper slide pins to 26 foot-pounds. We're going to put these dust covers back over the bolts. It keeps the elements out, just like that. Now we're going to install this anti-rattle spring. Just line this up here. Take my screwdriver. Pry it out a little bit while I'm pushing it, and just push it into place. Make sure that those little ears are locked in, and it's on there and it's good and tight. Now we're going to install the wheel and tire. Just line it up with the lug holes. Hold it on with one hand. Take your lug stud with a socket. Get those started. Once that's started, I'll just move that to the top. Get the other one started. Now we're going to torque these lug studs to 74 foot-pounds. We're going to torque them in a star pattern. That way the wheel is tightened down evenly. When we're working on the driver's side, there's actually a pad indicator, a wear indicator that is electric. There's a little sensor. So what you're going to want to do is we're going to want to replace this sensor. We're going to pull this out first. There's a wire tie right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut it off to put a new one on. And then over here, this is attached underneath the bleeder cap. Take a little screwdriver, pull this bleeder cap up, and then we'll slide this little piece off. Use the screwdriver to take that off as well. Up here, it's in a mounting bracket right here. You just slide it towards the inside of the car. And there's another mounting bracket right here. Slide that off. And there's a little cover right here. I'm going to open that, just pull those little locks off. And this is where the connector is. I'm going to slide this out, slide the connector out. There's a little lock right here on the connector. We'll just push down on that. You can use your finger or a little screwdriver. And then slide it out just like that. And we can pull this wire this way. And when you're over near the pad, you can use some small pliers or some needle nose. We're just going to pull it straight out, just like that. Now, this sensor didn't break when we pulled it out, and it doesn't look like it was worn at all. So we technically could reuse this sensor, but it's a good idea to replace it. Here's the new sensor. There's this little bump on one side. That's the side that's going to go towards the rotor. So we'll take this, slide it in here. We can use our little pliers or needle nose. Push it on like that. This will come up over here, go over the bleeder. We'll put the bleeder cap back on. I'm going to line this. This is going to go into the bracket on the back side of the shock, the back side of the strut, just like that. I'm going to use a little wire tie right here. We can trim the excess. This will come around here, slide into this bracket. We'll line the connector up. Let's see, this connector. If you look down through the center, oops, look down through the center, there's like a half circle type, and then there's the same on the connector side. So we'll line those up like that and lock it in. Once that's locked in, this can go back into this holder, this cover. Lock it in like that, and then close the cover. All right. After we perform the brake job, we're gonna come and pump the brake pedal. That's gonna remove some of the air gap. Right now, when we compressed the caliper piston into the caliper, there is a little air gap between the piston caliper and the brake pads. So by pumping the pedal, that's gonna eliminate that air gap, and then you'll be ready to drive your vehicle.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at 1aauto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.